speaking with Dr. Kozhi Makai. Kozhi, you and I have been friends for what it seems forever. Probably 20 years now? 15 years? Seems a long time.
It's been a long time, that's true.
And you've got a book that I'm going to give away. I've got a few copies you were gracious enough to send me. It's called Disrupted. And we did an interview right when COVID started about this book. You brought it out early. So it was set to be released, but not as early as March. Tell me how that changed things for you.
You know, when we got to that first quarter of the year, one of the things we noticed is a shift in the way business was being done and the needs people had. Folks were really struggling with the transition from being able to see pretty much everyone that they wanted to see, and then being in the position now where they had to stay home under lockdown. And it was very, very challenging for a lot of people. And I'm speaking about people that I know, both personally and professionally. That transition was difficult. And we made the decision that it was time to release the book because what folks were going through was a perfect example of what Disrupted is about. We were going through not just a personal disruption, we were going through a global disruption.
Right.
Things essentially were never the same, or were never going to be the same. And so we needed to give people a tool that would help them look at the disruption from a positive perspective rather than looking at it from a negative perspective.
Well, that's just one of the things that I wanted to bring up really quickly is that you are a researcher, and give us your whole set of credentials because it's pretty impressive.
Well, I appreciate it. I am a total nerd, so I love to learn. My bachelor's degree is in speech communication with a minor in psychology. My master's degree is in business communication with a focus on leadership and influence. My Ph.D. is in applied management and decision science with a focus on leadership and organizational change. And most recently, I got my doctorate of psychology with a focus on positive psychology. And the research that I did was really on resiliency. Excuse me. So I wanted to really understand how does positive psychology impact resiliency, and that resiliency, how is it affected by different types of disruption? And then, of course, really at the heart of it, what are the types of stories we tell ourselves, that we tell other people, but also the types of stories that we tell about our circumstances. And it's that research that really had me think about putting together a mass paper book so that I could share this research, but also give some practical advice to others.
Well, I think it's so important when we think about our stories. You know, there's a lot of people, and you explain all the different types of people in the book. There are the people that have had bad things happen to them, and they bring it up like it was yesterday, and they carry it around. It's a big piece of baggage, and that's who they identify with. Now, there are people that go through things and never tell anybody anything, and they also carry it around as baggage, but we don't see it. It's kind of like the invisible baggage. And then there are people that are just what you call resilient, that keep coming back again and again and again differently, and they have a whole different kind of story to tell themselves. It's a much more empowering story that they can own and grow from rather than be stunted, embarrassed, or ruined by.
I think you really hit the nail on the head. One of the things is empowerment. I believe that the difficult things that we go through, the challenges that we face, when we own them, we take ownership for them, it makes a huge difference in how we emotionally and psychologically process them. And taking ownership doesn't mean that whatever happened was our fault. And part of the challenge in the middle of disruption is trying to assign blame for it. If you think about all the disruption that's going on in the world right now, there's a lot of finger pointing because we want to make sure that somebody is to blame for it.
Right.
Now, somebody being assigned the blame and somebody being accountable are two separate things. It doesn't really matter to me personally. It doesn't matter who's to blame. Once we discover who's to blame, it doesn't change the circumstances. But when when ownership is taken, then the circumstances change. Now, the circumstances physically or emotionally themselves may not change, but my view of them and my perspective change because I put on a different pair of glasses.
Right.
So I may not be responsible for COVID-19, but I am completely accountable for how I respond and I react to COVID-19.
Well, you know, some businesses have done really, really well under COVID. They found they flourished. Other businesses have shut down completely. And I look at it, and it's because maybe their models were wrong or their owners were unwilling to acquiesce to the change. For whatever reason, the model doesn't work anymore. And I think it's nice to be nimble, and if you run your own business, you can be, but then again, you're at your own risk of how nimble you are as a person. So if you have trouble changing, you're going to have trouble making your business change, and then your business could go away just because you're outdated.
Well, agility is so important now more than ever. It's always been important, but it's probably more important now. And one of the things we're noticing in our observations, but also talking to clients who are on the business side, if you had a business model that was not sound, you didn't have a sound business model and a sound business plan, all that disruption will do is it'll highlight it and show what a gaping hole you have in your business.
Right.
It's just the same as going to the doctor, not being well, going to the doctor and going through multiple tests. Several things potentially are going to be revealed. And that's how I look at circumstances. Circumstances show up to reveal where our deficiencies are. All of us have deficiencies. The key is whether we can pivot out of those deficiencies. And right now, for those organizations that were able to pivot in the middle of this situation, they're doing well. There are restaurants that are still open because they pivoted very quickly to delivery only. They pivoted to making a partnership maybe with a delivery company, or
right.
They started doing the deliveries themselves. The key is being able to pivot.
When we look at our businesses, it is a reflection of what's going on personally, I think, for a lot of companies. And I think this is a great opportunity. I see all of this not as a problem, but as a great opportunity. It's changed the way I do business, and it makes me better because now I don't see a lot of clients face to face. I now do a lot of Zoom calls. They're more willing to do Zoom calls with me and fax documents or email documents or scan documents or whatever. And before, they wanted to see me, have an appointment with me, sit down. Now it's not so much that, thank goodness. I can get a lot more done. I make a lot more appointments. I see a lot more people. I can help a lot more people just because they've gotten out of their own way. You know, people have this big, big, bad story to tell me, usually around their credit or things that they're trying to do. And I still want to say, you know, I will listen to the story, but it doesn't matter. What matters is what we do moving forward. And I think that's the same thing that your book explains. It's, okay, now this is where you're at whatever problem you're having in life, whatever issue has arisen, not just COVID-19, but anything. This is where I'm at now. Now what do I do? Now where do I pivot? Do I sit and cry? Do I crawl in a hole? Or do I pick myself up, turn another direction, and move forward with a new purpose and a new understanding, and look at it as a learning experience, not that it's over?
Absolutely. I've always said and I've always believed that complaining is not a strategy. Complaining does not change the circumstances.
Right.
All it does is it shows where our maturity is. And I think COVID-19 has really forced us all to look in the mirror. It's forced us to really contend with the things that were broken both in our relationships and in us. We're spending more time with our family, not necessarily by choice, but by design and by circumstance. And so we'll have to really look at the strength and the depth of our relationships with our kids, with our friends, with our neighbors. We've had to ask those very difficult questions because this is extended. You know, we live in the South, we're in Texas, and so we get hurricanes. Usually you're looking at a week depending on what happens in that particular area. But this has been going on for several months. And so we've all had to think about those things. And as far as business, this is an opportunity for some people to scale, for people to look at technology from a very different perspective, and then use that technology as leverage to take their business to different heights. Same thing with education and learning. I run an education and learning organization. We do consulting, we do coaching. We're able to reach more people because I am not doing as much travel. So when I'm not traveling, now I could use that time to serve more people.
Right.
I'm sure that once COVID is taken care of, whatever that means, I'll certainly get back to travel. But we're now in a very good swing, both with me and our current clients. And the hope is that with our future clients, it will essentially be the same thing. That there'll be an opportunity for us to really extend their budget. Instead of them having to get 30 people together in one location, we can do, a third of the work. We can do a quarter of the work or 20% of the work remotely. And that brings added value, and the ROI on that is strong. But all this is showing us that disruptions have an opportunity for us to change our story, for us to change the words that we're using and the narrative that we tell about our circumstances, about who we are, where we are, and what's important to us. So to me, that's the real key.
When we talked about our story, one of the parts of your book said, if we're in disarray or disruption, maybe we should just be still and be quiet. There's a huge advantage to toning it down a little bit, isn't there?
There absolutely is. We're so driven by action. And I won't lie, I love that about our culture. When I say our culture, I mean the American ethos. We're very big on getting things done. I love that. But sometimes the getting things done that needs to be done is to be still. Sometimes you have to be still long enough to ensure that you're able to look at the entire picture. You're able to look at the entire environment and assess it appropriately. Oftentimes we rush to get things done and we're not necessarily getting the right things done. So I think a bias towards action is a wonderful, wonderful component of our ethos. But we have to be very careful and judge every situation in the appropriate way, so that maybe what we need to do is just take a step back and look at our business differently, take a step back and look at our relationships differently, take a step back and look at our health and who we are and what's important to us, what our values are, what our mission is. It really gives you time for pause. And as an organization, we had to do the same thing in the middle of COVID. We're fortunate that that's something that we do no less than twice a month. We take a step back and we look at the business from an outsider's perspective, because we want to see things that we normally may not be able to see, because we're so focused on the doing every day. There are needs, there are people that need to be taken care of, there's contracts that need to be signed and executed. There's all these things that need to be done. But really at the heart of it, that's not enough. That's not going to be sustainable long term. We have to constantly think about our strategy. And the best way to think about your strategy is to take a step back and really look at the circumstances independently of our emotions.
And isn't it nice that, I mean, I do this with businesses. I know you do this with businesses. I look at people's finances. I'm that third party outside that can look in and go, oh my gosh, you're a mess. What have you done? Let me try and fix you. And they're like, but what? I mean, we've been in like this for years. Yes. And it's amazing that you have jobs and you're responsible people and that you can pay your bills, because their financial world is a wreck. And the thing is, they don't see it. They live in that wreck. They don't see it as a wreck. They just see it as this is the way it is, because that's all they know. This is a great time for you to be able to help people evaluate themselves and their companies or their roles in companies and look at it from fresh eyes.
Absolutely. One of the things that we talk about a lot in our organization is this idea of sharpening your edge. And there's three parts to that whole idea of sharpening your edge. First, you have to discover your edge. Next, you have to sharpen it. And then you have to leverage it. And then do that all over again, because it's a cycle that we go through consistently. Part of discovering our edge is spending time assessing. And when you think about the word accountability that I talked about a few minutes ago, the root word for it is account. And whether it's in our finances or in our relationships, we have to take account and take stock of where we are. And so we have to constantly be evaluating and reevaluating. If a person owns a business and they don't have an idea of what their balance sheet looks like, they don't have an understanding of their P&L, then there's a problem, because they don't know how much money is coming in, how much is going out, where savings can be made, where revenues can be increased. Those are things that folks should be really thinking about. And for people who don't have a business, I think those are things they should be thinking about too. I think about that. Now, I know I'm a nerd, but I think about that. In what places can I leverage myself better so that I can be a better husband, so I can be a better friend? in what places can I sharpen my edge more so that I can be that person that I know I need to be, and what discoveries do I need to make?
But I
And
think
with the
stop right
discoveries,
there, right there.
hard questions.
You're asking yourself the hard questions because you're analyzing yourself. And I know you know this because you talk to people every day, but I see people that they go, well, that's just the way it is. That's just the way I do it. Well, I mean, they don't want to admit that there's a problem or that they're wrong, but it's the story they keep telling themselves that's holding them in place. It's not the truth. It's just the story they tell themselves.
I completely agree with you, and respectfully, for those people, the issue is laziness. One of the trends I'm seeing, both on the research side as well as just observing people and working with people one on one, is we don't just have an intellectual laziness. And I'll define that very quickly. So the intellectual laziness is when a person just swallows whatever information that they get whole without doing any research, without adding any critical thought to it. Whether it's coming from a TV station or it's coming from an internet source, people just look at information at face value and they think that's exactly what it is without having to do the work. The reason that folks will do that psychologically is because it's easier than doing the work, because then you have to have a little bit of investment in that. And it's the same way with any other area of our lives. I don't want to depend solely on one piece of data to let me know where I am. In research, we always try to triangulate our data. We try to find 3 research points or 3 data points that will hopefully lead us to a conclusion that makes sense. Oftentimes we only use one. So if I'm receiving data from one place, I want to be able to ask a different source and then do some other homework on my side so that I perhaps can get some triangulation going. But when we become lazy, then other people get to dictate what our story is. And that's the big issue for me when I was writing the book, is I didn't want people to get comfortable with somebody else dictating and writing their story. Because we all of us have this one journey on earth that we get to have. It's not like we'll have 15 or 20 of them. I have one, but I want my story to be heard. I want to tell my story with as much conviction and be unapologetic about it. But for me to do that, I really have to look deep inside and see where I really am. I have to look at where my business is, where my family is, and all of these other areas. And it's hard being able to do all of that because most of what we'll discover may not be something that we like.
Right. How do we get, so half of the people that I talk to don't realize that they're stuck or that they're in problems. They've done it for so long, they just think it's normal. What do you say to those people, or how do you unstick someone that, number one, may not know that they're stuck, but number two, may know that they're stuck and not admit it, or number three, they don't have a problem with being stuck. They like stuck where they're at.
Well, in my world, I generally don't enter a situation until the pain that a person is experiencing is so severe that they're now willing to change.
Got it. So maybe they have to hit like rock bottom, or they have to not. So if you're just going along at an average of life and an average of life is all you want, then you probably don't have any problems.
No, you don't.
Because you're fine.
Right. Yeah, and people have that right to do that. I think everyone, part of freedom is people being able to choose what life they want and what life they will have. And I want to be a part of the process that allows them to do that. I do want to tell them what options they have in front of them, but if they choose to stay where they are, that's fine. I still want to give them the opportunity to learn, but once they've chosen not to take that direction, that's absolutely okay with me as well. But it's important for people to know what options are in front of them. And in general, I work with people who, once they've figured out what options are in front of them, they make that choice. Any of the folks that we coach, I do not chase them. Not because I'm too good. It's just that if I have to chase you to help you, then you really don't want the help.
Got it.
When a person sets an appointment for a coaching session, I don't chase them around for that session. We confirm the appointment, but you miss the appointment, my day continues moving on. It's their loss. Because we want people to learn how to be accountable. When you take ownership and you have accountability, you have a better chance of changing your life. But if you relegate that ownership and you relegate that accountability to the government, to the stage, to your neighbors, to your spouse, to your friends, and to everything else but you, then you're not ready truthfully and respectfully to live a full life.
And that's okay. It's not for everyone.
Correct. That's absolutely okay. That is absolutely, it's okay with me, and it's also the reality. Um, Not everyone is willing to put in the work necessary to move their life an inch further, to move their life a mile further. Not everybody's willing, and that's okay too.
That's just hard for me and you know me well enough to know. I see the potential in everybody. The problem is they don't see the potential in them. And if they don't see it, then that's really all that matters. I can't want it more for you than you do.
Correct. We certainly can't want more for people than they want for themselves. Let me rephrase that. We can want more for people than they want for themselves. What will happen is that a portion of them will see that sincerity, and they'll see that there's actually more in them, and hopefully that's enough to move the needle and get them moving in that direction of wanting, of being willing to make shifts and changes. But then there's going to be a lot of people who they will never see it. And it does break my heart because I absolutely love people. Everything that I've done in my professional and personal career is built around human beings and people. And so I love and I care for people. But I also know that I love and care for them enough that I give them the freedom to make their own decisions and their own choices, even if I disagree with them.
On a personal side, I know you wrote this book, and I've got some copies to give, and we're going to get them out to people. But you talked about how you and Tabitha, your marriage, I've known you guys forever. You're each your own person, and you enhance her life and she enhances your life, but you're not asking for someone to do something for you that you can do yourself or find other places. So you enhance each other. She doesn't look to you for all of her joy and excitement, because that would be really boring and a lot of pressure. And I think in our relationships, we've done that, and with our businesses, we've done that as well. We look very single-handedly forward in just one direction, and maybe if people pick up this book, they can understand that there's more ways to get that. There's more ways to skin a cat, as I always said. My dad always said, there's just more ways to get there. There's just not one way.
I completely agree. One of the hardest things is, from a culture perspective, we've been told that what we need is somebody to come into our lives to complete us. And I understand the heart and the sentiment that they're trying to use, but practically and realistically, that is just not true. To suggest that a human being is incomplete until fill in the blank is to show just how deficient we are as human beings. I was a whole person when Tabitha came into my life. What she did was come into my life and add to it and enhance it rather than complete it. I don't want someone to come into my life and complete it. I don't want my friends to come into my life and complete it. I want my friends to come into my life and enhance it and enhance my life in all these different areas. Having somebody else do the completion for us again takes away that responsibility from us.
Right.
It's my responsibility to learn how to be a whole and complete human being, a whole and complete man.
And that's hard for people, because I don't think we teach our children that. We don't hear that in our churches. We don't hear that at our workplace. It's a whole different mentality for some people to grasp.
It really is. For me, I have found that, and this is the whole truth and the blunt truth. Human beings are extremely unreliable, and I'm one of them. And if Tabitha were to rely on me to complete her or to give her everything that she needs, she would get disappointed every day because I'm incapable of doing that. There's so much limitation to me as a human being. The only person that I want her to depend on fully and wholly is God, because in our world as Christians and as believers, He's the only one that can fulfill that role. So for me as a human being, the only thing I can do is bring some enhancement to her life. And the analogy I use is she brings the cake. She makes the cake. She does all of that, which is kind of funny because she's a chef, right? So she makes the cake. My job is to come ice it and decorate it, because we can ice it and decorate it so many different ways. I can't cook the cake for her. She has to bring that, just like I have to bring my own cake, and then she comes in and she beautifies my cake. That's our job with our clients. That's our job in our communities, is to come in and to beautify our communities with our sense of humor, with our engagement in life, with our different perspectives rather than being the people that come in and actually build somebody else's life. And our kids need to learn that. They need to learn that from us, that they can be strong and independent people. When I think about parenting, that's our job. Our job is to help a young person become a responsible adult. And the best way to allow people to become responsible adults is to give them the opportunity to make adult decisions and then suffer the consequences, good and bad, for those decisions. And it's the same with our friends, our neighbors, and our parents, and so on. Is everybody makes decisions, and we all have to suffer the consequences, the good ones and the bad ones, for the decisions that we make. All they need to know is that we will be there to support them and help them pick up the pieces should things fall apart.
Well, now, Kozhi, this is good advice, and you're going to be on my business show as well as my wellness show, because this is both. I mean, this, because every business is made up of individuals. And so, we're looking at a lot of businesses to go back and talk about businesses for a minute. You go back, and if you're a proprietorship of a business, or you're the boss of a business, or a manager, or the owner, that business runs a lot like you do. So if you don't fix you, you're not going to be able to have a strong, healthy business either. If you don't pivot well in your personal life, you probably don't pivot well in your business life. There's just a lot of correlations.
There absolutely is. In our organization, we use the word propersonal when it comes to everything that we do. So we do our propersonal development and so on, because when you develop as a professional, it should impact you positively personally. When you develop personally, it should impact you professionally as well. And so we take that holistic perspective where we're looking at the whole human being. When people go into their offices, or they clock in, or they go into their little space at home right now, and they get into work mode, it's not as if who they are as a human being is left on the other side. We all walk in with the burdens that we're carrying, the challenges that we're carrying, the personalities that we already have. If we can enhance people's personalities, right? Show them that there are parts of their personality that can be leveraged in one way compared to another. If we show them that the skills and the knowledge that they have, those things can be enhanced with the right type of attitude. If we do that, then those are concepts that they live with and they live by every day. And that allows them then to use them both at home and at work, and technically everywhere in between. But we have to touch the whole human being, especially for business owners, because as a business owner, my fingerprint is on everything. And I want my fingerprint to be on everything in a positive way. And the people that we hire, we want them to have the same mentality, that their fingerprint is on the business, and it needs to be a positive fingerprint and a positive footprint that they put into the work that we do. But we have to constantly be working on developing ourselves both personally and professionally.
Got it. Kozhi, how can they get a hold of you if they have a business that they need coached and counseled in, or really, how can they grab a hold of your book? I've got some copies I'm giving away, but they're going to need to buy their own.
The simplest way is to go to our website, and I'll give you two different websites that are helpful. It's KozhiMakai.com, which is KOZHIMAKAI.com, or they can go to sharpeningyouredge.com, sharpeningyouredge.com.
Got it. I love that you talk about psychology in a positive way. We are trying to enhance and make things better. And I think the disruption that we've gone through is just, we've all gone through it at the same time. And I think you're really going to see in years to come, the stories that are told, was this the best of times or the worst of times? I don't know. It depends on your perspective.
Correct. It really is. And I think, that line is actually perfect, because it's both. It's both the best of times and the worst of times. We're going to experience the pain of change and disruption. All of us are. We're going to experience it in differing ways. But the folks that are going to gain benefit from it are the people who leverage that story very, very differently. And they look at the story and they say, well, that was the year that the whole world came to a halt. But it was also the same year that I decided to make an appropriate pivot that transformed my business, transformed my life, transformed my
Or it was the worst year ever and everything fell apart and I lost all my customers and I became destitute. Right. Yeah, because what they leave out is, but it was my fault that I didn't pivot, or it was my fault that I didn't change. They're going to leave that section out, but that's the truth.
Absolutely.
Thanks for being with me today. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.